All right, and we are ready to go. So I'd like to welcome everybody to statistical analysis in psychology. So what we're going to be doing today is this is going to be your intro into the course. This is going to be where we just lay everything out for you so that you know what to expect, what's going to be coming up on this semester, and just kind of introduce you to this experience. So what we're going to specifically cover today, we're going to start off with a brief intro. So some of you I recognize, some of you I don't, so I'll just start off with who I am, mention some of my research projects that I use statistics for, the various skills you'll be learning in this course, and then also just talk about an initiative I'm part of, which is the Stigma-free initiative. Then we're going to have a course overview, we'll take a look at the course procedure, and then finally just hit some syllabus highlights so that you know how to navigate the syllabus that is now available in Canvas, so you can plan out your semester so we can have the best learning experience possible. All right, so who am I? We'll start off with the name, one of the hardest parts of this course. My name is Dr. Juricevic. So like a lot of things in statistics, this seems to be a very complicated thing, but it's really made up of a whole bunch of simple parts. And the better you can do the simple parts, the better you can do the complicated thing. So when I tell people that my name is Juricevic, it gets butchered more often than not. But if you break it down into smaller parts, like right at the beginning, there's a U, and then you follow that up with a reach, and then you open up and say and then finally there's a veach, and for any math minors in here, that little gray triangle there is what's known as a veach. So it's U, reach, veach. So let's try that on 3. 1, 2, 3. All right, I'm going to give you a pass on that one since it's the beginning of the semester. Let's give it one more shot. 1, 2, 3. All right, not bad. So this is going to be a very important slide in this course because statistics, one of the things that statistics will start off with is intuitive. So it's definitely a skill that needs to be learned, and it's definitely a skill that at some points of it might not make a lot of sense to you. And that would be the perfect time to use this slide, raise your hand, and just ask for clarification. You can raise your hand and say, Dr. Juricevic, can you go through that one more time? Dr. Juricevic, I forgot what formula in Excel we were using. Can you let me know? And then also during practice time in class, put up your hand. Dr. Juricevic, I've tried this problem twice. I'm still getting it wrong. Can you help me figure out what mistakes I'm making? So feel free to use it as often as you need to because, again, this is not an intuitive way of thinking. We're going to change the way that you think about the world and about how to deal with numbers and scores. But feel free to use this slide as much as you need to reach the goals for yourself in this course. All right, so now on to the research project. So stats is one of the main skills that you need in order to do and understand research. So when you're doing your advanced lab, when you're doing your senior seminar, you're going to use a lot of the skills you learned in this semester in order to do those projects to make your contribution to psychology. But even later on, if you don't go into research, you'll read about studies, you'll read about new findings in psychology, and you'll need the stats in order to understand it. So the research projects that I do use statistics to get to the truth of what is going on. So just kind of introduce my background. What I work on primarily these days is visual language. It's the idea that much like we have a verbal language that we can communicate with, we also have a visual language, pictures, images, pictorial metaphors like this one here, that we can use in order to communicate to individuals. So my specific area is in visual metaphor. That's what I've been working on most recently. And using the skills that you're going to learn, we've done a number of studies here at IUSB where we've taken a look at the grammar of visual communication. So one of the best places to find visual communication is in comic book art. That's primarily where I do my research. So we take a look at this cover here from Daredevil. The artist is trying to communicate something about the story. He's trying to communicate something about what's going to happen in this particular narrative. Here's another cover from a different artist for the cover of Falcon. And as you can see, even though they're two completely different covers done by two completely different artists, the grammar, the structure of it is pretty much the same. So for example, in both cases, you have the villain drawn pretty much in the center, but drawn in an exaggerated scale, right? Drawn in gigantic size. This is a way to communicate that this villain is going to be important, that they're powerful, that they're going to be a big obstacle for the hero. And you'll also notice that the heroes in this case, they're drawn, but they're drawn off-center. So they haven't been placed in the center of the image. They're drawn off to the side in both cases. And that asymmetry is used to communicate that the hero is a little bit unnatural, is a little bit different. Most things in nature have symmetry. We have symmetry. So placing things off symmetry just lets you know that this person is a little bit different, a little bit outside of that typical experience. So that's the kind of work that I've been doing. One of the projects that we completed is on action lines and other metaphorical devices in comic books and how they're processed by your mind. And by using the stats that you'll be learning in this class, we actually found that if you draw an image that has literal devices, things that actually happen in the real world, like if a person is running, their arms will literally be in certain positions, their legs will literally be in certain positions. You can combine that with metaphorical information, like these action lines here. So it doesn't matter how fast you run, you're not going to have lines coming out from behind you in the real world. So that's a metaphor, it doesn't actually occur. And what we found through an analysis of hundreds of these images is that our minds can process as much literal information as an artist can put into a picture, but in terms of metaphorical information, it processes one piece and then it stops. Adding more metaphors, such as multiple images, does not increase the understandability of that particular image. And if you're interested in that, that was published in the Comics Grid, Journal of Comic Scholarship, and that was actually published with a former undergrad here at IUSB. And then a follow-up study, and that was also published in the Journal of Graphic Novels and Comics. More recently, we also did a study on how do we understand when something is supposed to be interpreted as a metaphor and when something is supposed to be interpreted literally. So if we say something like, John has a heart of stone, we know that that means a metaphorical heart of stone. We know that that means that John is cold, he's emotionless, he's a distant person. If we understood that literally, we would be really worried about John. We would want to rush him to the hospital and take a look at this medical marvel that could survive with a heart of stone. So how do we do that in images? How do we understand when a device is being used metaphorically versus literally? So once again, comic books, perfect avenue or area for this type of research, because in comics, they'll often use gigantic size, like in this image of from Mockingbird, they'll often use gigantic size metaphorically. So Mockingbird is a regular sized individual, but here she's portrayed as a gigantic image on this cover, and that's to be understood metaphorically. That's to be understood that she is very powerful, that she's important to the story, that she's the central aspect of this narrative. On the other hand, you also have instances like this. So Galactus is literally a giant in the Marvel Universe. He's literally a consumer of worlds that stands, multiple skyscrapers tall. So this is literally supposed to be interpreted as, well, Galactus is just like, 1,000 feet tall. So how is it that our minds decide that this is going to be literal and this is going to be metaphorical? And what we did in our research is we took a look at two sources of information from the context, knowing about the character, knowing about the fact that you're looking at comic book art, bringing that world context to it. And then we also took a look at the structure inherent in each image. and saw how those combined. And it's a little complicated to summarize the results because there's a lot of moving parts. As you can imagine, our minds are pretty weird. But if you're interested, that was actually published in the International Journal of Comics Art. And a follow-up study, we actually have 2 follow-up studies that are being submitted. One continuing in comic book art, and then the other one in fine art, kind of paintings, abstract art, things like that. All right, so the final research project I'll just let you in on that I did had to do with where do metaphors actually come from, and how do they spread within our visual language. So when I put up this image, most of you probably understood the metaphor that's being represented here. This woman has had a great idea. And that light bulb above the head, we understand that as being indicative or meaning a great idea. And you know, that's something that we can process and understand immediately. It's widespread in our culture. But somebody had to do it first, and it had to spread, right? It had to spread throughout our culture. So who did it first? How did it spread? That was another question that we looked at. Once again, going back to comic book art, we identified a metaphor that we labeled QA for close-up eye asymmetry. And as it turns out, this metaphor is used a lot in comic books where you will portray a character in close-up, so you just have a close-up on their face and their shoulders, and then also something about their face will be asymmetrical around the eyes. So here we have Storm, and she actually has 2 sources of asymmetry. One is her hair falling only over one eye, it's not falling symmetrically about her face. And then the other one is this little lightning bolt coming out of her eye. And if you know about Storm, you know she has storm powers. But there's nothing about her powers that are asymmetrical. So this was a conscious decision by the artist to try to communicate something about Storm. Same thing with Magneto over here. His powers are not asymmetrical, and yet here we have asymmetry close up first and then asymmetry around the eye. We have it here in Harbinger. He has psychic powers, close up asymmetry around the eye. You can also do it using shading. You can do it using props, such as this camera here and this skull over here. And then you can also use it with composition. So once again, we have that grammar we talked about before. Large villain, other person off and asymmetrical. But once again, notice that we have asymmetry around the eye. This individual could have been placed in the center, but it was placed to obscure one eye. And notice again, we have scars on this second eye over here. Here we have a lightning bolt placed over just one eye. And then here we have Witchblade. She could have been anywhere, but she is right in front of only one of Laura Croft's eyes, leaving that asymmetrical. So we identified this metaphor, and then we traced it back using developmental psychology, using frequency analyses, using psychology of art and aesthetics and its development. And we basically traced it back to a single source. And what we found was that not only was it in comics, it's in movies, it's in a lot of different media. And it was actually traced back, we traced it back to a single image. And I believe this is the first time this has ever been done. We traced it back to a single image, and it was an image from David Bowie, and it was his cover for Aladdin Sing. So this cover came out in the 1970s, and if you were 9 to 13 years old when this cover came out, you were in your critical artistic developmental period. This is where single works can have the greatest influence on your artistic trajectory. And if you take the timeline for when this device exploded in its use, which was in the 90s, and you match that up with when is an artist most prolific and most innovative, which is when they're in their late 20s, early 30s, if you match up all of that, it means that the image that came out would have come out in the 1970s, and that was the evidence for that particular image. So just all this kind of converging evidence had this as that, what they call it, a crystallizing experience that later on led to this being incorporated in a variety of different images by different artists. So if you're interested in that, that is also published in the Comics Grid. And I love the fact that I have a publication about David Bowie out there in the world. And I also love that this one, for your reading pleasure, contains an F-bomb. So I have a published F-bomb in one of my articles, which is a very rare thing for an academic publisher. All right, so that was my research. Before we get down to the stigma-free initiative, just a few more things. So I have a Twitter account, @PoliteInsane. That will be used a little bit this semester if you choose to do it for the social media development bonus points that are going to be available. But for this point in time, if you're interested in seeing some of the work that my lab does, you can check out the hashtag Comic Book of Scientist and also the hashtag Too Hard for Soft Science. But then importantly for this course, if I ever identify something that might be helpful for students in this course, might be something that could help you along in your journey through this statistics course, if I retweet it, I'm going to hashtag it with PoliteInsane P354. So that's a hashtag that you can just kind of search for every once in a while. And if anything comes up that I feel would be beneficial for you to be exposed to, I'll just send it out with a retweet and you can check that out via that hashtag. And while we're on the issue of social media, one last thing that I'll mention is that I do have a YouTube channel where I post the lectures that I give for my courses, so that's why I had to wait for my recording app to begin. So there's a link for the playlist. I'll also post it in Canvas so you can just go there directly. So importantly for you, this is where I will be posting lectures from this course. So every single lecture that I have, I will post it up on YouTube so that you can watch it later, you can review it, you can see things again. But then also, I have previous semesters of this course as well. So if you ever need to work ahead, if you ever want to see something explained, for example, before you attempt the pretest, you do have those resources there, so you can explore the videos there and just get any help that you might need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All right, last one about me, and then we'll talk a little bit about the course, is the Stigma-Free initiative that I'm a part of. So the National Alliance on Mental Illness, they started this initiative called the Stigma-Free movement, and as part of the pledge to be stigma-free is the idea of removing the stigma from mental health, and the way to remove it is to shine a light on it and just be honest and talk about it. So this is my public service announcement that I have at the beginning of all of my classes, just to let people know that I was diagnosed with depression. I have struggled with depression in my life, and just to kind of put it out there and let you know that it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just like breaking your arm. It's something that you need help with. It's something that you can overcome, and it's time that we remove the stigma around mental illness so that people who need the help don't feel ashamed to go get the help. So number one, it's nothing to be ashamed of. I say it loud and proud. I suffered from depression, and I'm doing the best that I can. And in terms of doing the best that you can, I also just want to show you what can happen when you get help, right? So when you get help, good things can happen. So what we have here is the timeline of my time here at IUSB. So right there is where we're going to start, fall of 2010. That's when I started here at IUSB. And right about there in the spring of 2012, that's when I got my official diagnosis of depression. I would love to say that right about here is when I became depressed, but part of the reason for this stigma-free initiative is that I was living with depression, just undiagnosed, for I don't even know how long. So if there was no stigma, this era would have been a lot shorter. But thankfully, I did go and I did get help, and I had my final prescription filled in the spring of 2013, and I would love to tell you that that was it. Depression was done, I was free and clear, but recovery is an ongoing process, and sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but definitely more steps forward than steps back. So why am I giving you this timeline? Well, one of the things we use to measure productivity in psychology. Productivity as a professor has to do with what do you publish? What research do you put out there? So the green is peer-reviewed publications, the blue is non-peer-reviewed publications. And when I was in my worst stage of depression, I managed to squeeze out one publication, and that was in 2012. As I began to recover, as my thoughts began to be more positive, to be more in tune with what was actually happening in the world, my work came back. My work recovered as well as my emotional well-being. So in 2016, I had 2 publications. In 2016, sorry, 3 publications. In the spring of 2017, I had another 5. And then we actually got to zoom in here or scroll on down a little bit in 2018. And then in 2019, another 4. And we, like I said, got 2 more in the submission stage right now. So there's more coming in 2012. But this is just to show you what can happen once you deal with your depression. So to kind of wrap this stage up, I would encourage all of you to kind of do a self-check, really be honest with yourself, and if you think that you might be suffering from depression, or if you think you might have any other mental illness, and I'm going to emphasize that, if you think, if you even suspect, if there's even a hint in your mind that maybe this is something that you're struggling with, I would say sit down and get help. Number one, you can't do this alone. Forget about that myth, forget about that narrative that we have in our society about the single hero who's just going to will themselves through this difficult time. That's not true. That does not apply to mental illness. So find help, get help, and sometimes it's difficult to start. So if you find that it's difficult to start, if you still feel surrounded by that stigma, let me be your first step. Come talk to me, come during an office hour, and let me be your point of contact. And like I said, I've gone through it, so there will be no judgment whatsoever. And let me be the first person that you talk to if you're feeling the need. And again, be honest with yourself. Let's make sure that nobody else is stuck in this stage so that we can all get to the wonderfulness of being fully functional and fully operational. All right, enough about me. Let's talk about the course. So in this course, this is going to be your introduction to statistics. The emphasis is going to be on applying it to psychological research. So statistics, if this was an intro to statistics course, your textbook would be probably around that thick. If it was an introduction to sciences, statistics for sciences course, it would be about that thick. If it's an introduction to statistics for psychology, it squeezes it down. Because it just happens that the type of work that we do in psychology can be analyzed by only a subset of the statistics. And that's what we're going to focus on, what you really need to understand psychology. So we're going to cover measures of central tendency, elementary probability, statistical inference, decision-making, hypothesis testing, and analysis of variance. And do not worry if none of those terms make sense to you right now. All of those terms will make sense to you by the end of this semester. That's what we're here for. And you will also develop software using skills. So we are going to use Excel and we're going to use SPSS. SPSS is a dedicated statistical analysis software. So we're also going to learn how to do that and become proficient with those software tools. All right, so the objectives of this course, some of the objectives are the same objectives that you had for the general education requirement for quantitative reasoning. So these objectives you've already met for the prerequisite for this course. So we won't spend too much time on those, but we also have these objectives which you will be learning, which is how to use Excel formulas to calculate statistical measures, how to use MyLab in order to do your work. So most of our work is going to be done through the MyLab internet homework solution. You're going to learn how to calculate measures of central tendency and variability, z-scores. Most importantly, and this is what we're going to build the entire course towards, you're going to learn how to do hypothesis testing and choose the correct hypothesis test. You're going to learn how to use SPSS to perform those hypothesis tests and also to calculate intervals. So we're going to learn how to do all that. And one of the reasons that you're here, and this is, I mean, I'll just be honest with you, one of the reasons that you're here is that this is a required course. And I know that, and you know that, so we won't beat around the bush. But why is it a required course? Why did the powers that be decide that if you want to be a psychologist, if you want to have a psych major, you need to be in here and you need to learn about statistics? And the reason for it is because statistics is what makes psychology powerful. Statistics is what gets you out of being biased in terms of analyzing results and gives you an objective way of analyzing the results and lets you get to the truth of what is really going on. So I'll give you a hypothetical example just to illustrate what this entire course is going to get us to, what this entire course is all about. So let's say that you're dealing with, you're investigating depression, you're doing research on depression, and you have 2 treatments that you want to try out. So you split your subjects into 2 groups. And group number 1, they get treatment A. And group number 2, they get treatment B. And after going through the treatments, you find that group A, you give them the Beck's Depression Inventory, and their Beck's Depression Inventory score is 42.6. Treatment B, on the other hand, has a Beck's Depression Inventory of 25.7. So they have lower depression. So when we see a result like this, our human minds intuitively just jump to the conclusion that treatment B must be the better treatment. And as psychologists who want to help a whole bunch of people, we would publish these results and we would phone up clinics and we would say, hey, we just did this experiment and wow, treatment B is better at treating depression. If you have subjects or patients that are on treatment A, put them on treatment B. Treatment B is way better. That's what we would do without statistics. And we could be making a huge, huge mistake. We could be making an error that is going to put people's lives in danger, that's going to lead to a decrease in the quality of their lives, that's going to have massive implications. Because that treatment B, the number here for the Beck's Depression Inventory was lower. All right, this is elementary school mathematics. 42.6 is higher than 25.7, right? We don't need to be in a course like this to understand that this is the lower score. But what does that lower score mean? Well, it could come from 2 sources. There's 2 reasons why that score could be lower. The first one is that it's a real difference. The first one is that treatment B is actually better than treatment A. And if treatment B is better than treatment A, it is our responsibility as psychologists, as our responsibility just as caring human beings, to tell people about treatment B and say, hey, I'm going to go to conferences and I'm going to do videos and I'm going to spread the word. Treatment B is going to help people, and that's how we make a difference. On the other hand, there's another reason why that number could have been lower, and that's a fluke result. It might just be due to chance. It might just have been due to a weird anomaly on that particular day. So any difference that you find in any study could be due to a real difference or a fluke result. If it's a real difference and you tell people about it, you're helping. You're making people's lives better. If it's a fluke result, you're putting people in danger and you are being a detriment to people and you're not helping anyone at all. And statistics, what we learn in this course, is going to give us an objective way of seeing, is it a real difference or is it a fluke result? Is it something that we should tell people about, or is it back to the drawing board to find a real treatment that really works? So you cannot understate the importance of this, of knowing whether differences that you see are actually the truth, or is it due to a fluke result. And we're going to see that statistics gives us a system of finding which one of these is the actual case. So I mentioned that this is going to change the way you kind of see the world. After this, you'll be able to apply statistical reasoning to a number of different issues. So to just give you an example of that, how your mind is going to change, we're going to talk about Captain Marvel. So if you remember on the release of Captain Marvel, there was a big issue in terms of how this female-led movie was going to be received, particularly by males, particularly by male critics. So that can be seen in articles such as this from the Mary Sue. Captain Marvel is fun, and most of the negative reviews are written by men. Shocking. So I saw that, and I thought to myself, are most of the negative reviews actually written by men? Is that the real case? And if there is a difference in the number of negative reviews written by men and written by female critics, is that due to a real difference? Is there sexism in the critics' process? Or is it due to a fluke result? So because it's kind of the things that I do, I went to Rotten Tomatoes and I coded, jumped the gun there, I went to every single reviewer and coded their review as either being positive or negative, and coded them as either being male or female. And what I found was that for female critics, it was 82%, sorry, male critics 82% fresh, female critics 87% fresh. So once again, elementary school mathematics, 87 larger than 82. More male critics are being negative compared to female critics. But the statistical analysis reveals that there actually was no gender bias. That was a fluke result. That was not a real difference, and you're going to see how to do that type of analysis in statistics. So basically what this is saying is that all of the sort of articles about, you know, these evil male critics, the backlash against female superheroes, all of that stuff was just made up. It was just fabricated. And it was harmful. It divided people, didn't bring people together. Stats allows you to get to the real truth of the matter. All right, so that is kind of the general idea of what we're going to be doing, what we're going to accomplish. Now let's take a look at a little bit of the course overview. And for this, we are going to do a very brief history of mathematics and statistics. So we'll start off with statistics. And this is very brief. This is just to give you a sort of teaser trailer for what the history of statistics has. Incidentally, we're not doing any of the history of statistics this semester. This is all you're going to get. So, Francis Galton. Francis Galton is basically the godfather of modern statistics. So, he came up with ways of calculating an average. So if you ever calculate your average score, your average grade, he's the one that came up with the way of doing that. He also came up with various measures of variability that we're also going to take a look at. William Gossett. William Gossett came up with the t-test. He came up with, he called it the student's t-test because he actually published anonymously for a large portion of his career. Ronald Fisher came up with the F-test and the ANOVA, so F-test for Fisher. We're going to learn that right at the end. It's another way of hypothesis testing for different types of situations. We're going to learn that in the last week of class, along with John Wilder-Tukey, who also contributed to ways of analyzing data and hypotheses by coming up with the Tukey test, so not the most imaginative of names, but nevertheless, came up with the Tukey test to allow us to understand differences between multiple groups. So those were for the big innovators in statistics, the big contributors to statistics that we're going to see their work this semester. Now let's take a look at the history of mathematics. So starting off very early, we got Euclid. Euclid came up with Euclid's geometry. Euclid's geometry is basically the geometry that you learned in elementary school. So the three cardinal directions, shortest distance between 2 points is a single line. That was all Euclid's geometry. Pythagoras, famous for his theorem, the Pythagorean theorem, for any right triangle, the sum of the square of the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the square of the other two sides. We have Isaac Newton, who is famous for coming up with his laws of physics, but also contributed to mathematics, invented calculus, along with, he simultaneously invented it, but he's given the most credit for it, invented calculus, and then I wanted to put a more modern mathematician, just so you don't think math is done. And this is Kurt Gödel, and Kurt Gödel came up with what is known as the incompleteness proof, and that is to say that any system that, no matter how complex, will always be incomplete. It can never be a complete system that can handle all situations. And if you're interested in this, because it does have applications to psychology, especially in for ideas of consciousness, there is a very accessible book. I know it looks like a brick, but it's a very accessible book called The Golden Braid, Gödel, Escher, and Bach. And it is a great sort of intro to these ideas, and especially in terms of how it might apply to consciousness. All right, so, oh yeah, I don't know why this one didn't come up. That's how important it is. When scientists used to post selfies, they would post it with their Gödel, Escher, and Bach book. All right, so why this brief history? You can tell how old this photo is because he's actually holding up the camera. All right, so in this, why this history? Why this history of stats and mathematics? I did this for one big reason, to prove one major point, and to disprove a misconception that I'm sure a lot of you are coming in here with that we need to get rid of right off the bat. And that is the idea that if you want to be good at statistics, you have to be good at math. And if you're not good at math, then you can't be good at statistics. And I showed you this to just prove to you that the major contributors to statistics and the major contributors to math are completely different people. That is evidence. That should begin to convince you that statistics is completely different than mathematics. So all of the mathematics that you need to do well in this course, you learned in high school. We are not going to learn any new mathematics except for two things, and we're going to learn that next class. And then that's it. You will have all the mathematical tools that you need. This is not a course about math. We're in fact going to hand off as much of the math as possible to Excel, for Excel to calculate, and then later on to SPSS, for SPSS to calculate. So you're not going to be doing a whole lot of math. What you are going to be doing, though, is you're going to learn how to think like a statistician. You're going to learn how to use the math that you already know and how to apply it to situations to make sense of the world. So if you came in here with a little bit of math anxiety, if you came in here saying to yourself, you know what, I'm not a math person, so I'll struggle through stats and I guess I'll just kind of grind it out until the end, get that out of your mind. You do not have to be a math person in order to do statistics. And I've taken a look at previous students' performance in this course, and if you take a look at the students that start off with A's in their math prerequisites, they end up with A's in this course. If you take a look at the students who scraped by and got a C- in their math prerequisites, they end up with A's in this course. So it's not correlated between the two. You don't need to be a math wizard in order to do this course. You need very basic mathematical skills, which you all have, but just get that out of your mind if you were at all worried that your lack of math proficiency was going to impact your performance in this course. Get that out of your mind. You're going to find as we go through very little math actually in this course. So what are you going to learn in this course? Well, you're going to learn how to think like a statistician. We're going to change the way that you think. You're going to end up thinking like a statistician. So we're going to change you into being able to think like somebody like Ronald Fisher. And the thing about stats that might be different from other courses that you've experienced, and definitely is super true of statistics, is that it needs to be practiced. It absolutely needs to be done. You cannot read statistics and then be able to understand statistics. It's one of those things where you have to do statistics. It's almost like playing a sport. You can't just read about baseball and then say to yourself, I guess I'm great at baseball. You need to actually go out and play baseball. Well, you can't just read about statistics. You actually have to go out and play statistics. So it needs to be practiced. So all of this is actually really good news, because I'm going to assume that everybody here is starting at the beginning. I'm going to assume that you all came in here with no previous knowledge of statistics. I'm going to assume that nobody was perusing Ronald Fisher's Wikipedia page on their spare time on the weekend. So everybody's starting at the beginning. And the great thing is that the program that I've developed in this course, and it has been proven time and time again, everyone can do this. Every student that has put in the time and has followed the program that I've outlined has been able to successfully achieve the learning outcomes in this course. So if you at all thought, again, that this course was just not for you, that you're not mathematically minded, that's great. You're not mathematically minded, fine, that's perfect. You can still do stats, you can still do well at this course. But the big thing is that you need to practice. You absolutely need to practice it. So on that note, I have designed this course to basically allow for that practice. So if you take a look at the time, so this is a clock here. This is a mathematician's clock. So that's, if you solve this equation, that's 1, that's 2, that's 3. If you can't solve any of these, don't worry, because that's math, it's not stats. What we're going to try to do as much as possible, this first class clearly being an exception, is that we're going to try to have half of the course devoted to lectures. So half of the course is going to be devoted to hearing about the new concepts, me presenting them maybe in different ways, using more visual cues to kind of help you understand that information. And then the other half of the course is going, of class meeting times, is going to be devoted to practice. You actually doing the concepts and the skills that you've learned about. So some of that practice is going to be follow along practice. Well, I will demonstrate it and you work there following along. Some of it will be independent, so at the end of class, I'll basically say, well, this is practice time, and you guys have that time to develop your skills. So that's going to be the basic setup. And one thing to get into your mind is definitely dedicate time to practice. Definitely dedicate the time that you need to get very proficient with these skills. So the more practice you put in, especially at the beginning, the more automatic those little pieces will become, so that when you string them all together, it'll be much more straightforward to do them all in a row, because they'll become very, very automatic. So when you're thinking about practice, I want you to think of the following video and kind of have this as your idea of, let me see if I can get up here. Have this as your idea of how much you need to practice. Have this as your sort of metric, there we go, for how much practice is enough practice. So once again, how much practice is enough practice? All right, so a little crude, I will admit, yes, but proves the point, and something I hope that you will remember as you go through this semester. This is the kind of motto that you want to remember while you're practicing. Don't practice until you get it right, practice until you can't get it wrong. So when you sit down to try something new, when we've just learned a new concept and you have that practice time in this class, and you try it and it's not correct. So you try it again and you still can't get it right. And you try it a third time, and finally you're like, oh my gosh, I got the right answer. You're not done practicing. That's just the beginning of practicing. And what you want to do is you want to do it again and get it right. And you want to do it again and get it right. And you want to do it again and get it right. And you want to get it to the point where when you sit down to do that type of a question, it is just automatic. And you don't even have to really think about it. It just kind of flows. It just kind of comes automatically. That's the kind of level you want to get to. So that's going to be especially true for, again, a lot of the early parts of this course. There's going to be a lot of stuff that's very straightforward. A lot of things that if you just kind of think about it and pay attention, you're going to be able to do. Don't just stop there. Make sure that you do it over and over and over again so that you can do it when you're thinking and paying attention, but you can also do it when you're not thinking and paying attention. All right, because the one thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to be sitting in front of your mirror practicing your statistics going, I'm Batman, I'm Batman, I'm Batman. And then when you're fighting criminals on the rooftop, AKA your exams, all of a sudden you forget and you're Bruce Wayne. You want to get it to the point where it's very quick, very automatic. So you will have multiple chances to practice all of the concepts. So we will have pre-tests in this course. You will then come to the lecture. We'll do live follow-along demonstrations. You will have, most of the times, practice materials given to you that you can practice. You will then have homework assignments where you can practice it again. You will then have a post-test where you can practice it one last time. So multiple stages of practice. Make sure you're taking advantage of all those. You'll also have a study plan through my lab. We'll talk about my lab next class in more details, where you can get all of this stuff done. Make sure that you're taking advantage of it. Don't practice it until, oh, finally I've gotten it right. No. Practice it until you know automatically what to do, and you cannot get it wrong. All right, continuing with the course overview. Your course, we're going to represent it metaphorically here. This is where you are right now in this course. So that's you sitting here in class on the first day. This podium here, this pillar, this represents everything that you know that we're going to use in this statistics course, and this represents the skills that you have that we're going to use in this statistics course. This represents where we're going to get to, right up there, by the end of this semester. So as you can see, right now, there is no way for you to get from where you are to where we're going to get at the end of this semester. And if you want proof of this, flip to chapter 10 when you have access to your e-text. We'll do that again next class. And you read it. It'll make no sense whatsoever. So how are we going to get there? Well, we're going to get there by basically increasing your knowledge of statistics. And then you can use the skills that you have to make it to that next level, learn those new concepts, and make it closer to our goal of getting to here. Now, one thing that you'll notice is that as we progress in this semester, the skills that you currently have are not enough to make it through to the end of the semester. We're going to have to develop new skills. We're going to have to practice new ways of doing things. And as you practice those, your skills are going to grow, and you can make it to the next platform. And then this is going to occur over and over and over again until finally we get to that last platform, increase the skills one last time, and you get to the top of that platform and you get a great grade in this course, and you look back on it and you think to yourself, why was I ever intimidated by statistics? This course is amazing. All right, so that's the plan. One pitfall though that I want you to be wary of is if you try to get here before you increase your skills, you're going to end up down here. And you're gonna know you're there when things stop making sense. So this is gonna be my first sort of like PSA for red flags in this course. If you ever come to a lecture and you leave that lecture, you leave this class, and you are completely confused. If you ever leave the class and you're thinking to yourself, I have no idea what Dr. Udicevich was talking about today. I couldn't understand anything. Rewatch the YouTube video, maybe reread the chapter, but if it still doesn't make sense, that means that you've fallen into this pit over here. That means that you didn't have the skills necessary to make it to the next step. That means that the things that needed to be very automatic weren't quite there, weren't quite ready. So if that ever occurs to you, I highly, highly recommend come to my office hours. We will rescue you from this pit. I've done it before. I'll do it again. But make sure that you get out of this pit, because stats, unlike any other course that I've ever taught, builds on everything. So the things we learn in week 1, we are going to use in week 16. The things we learn in week 1, we're going to use in week 2. And week 2 is going to be used in week 3. And week 3 is going to be used in week 4. And week 5 is going to build on week 4. You can't skip any of it. You have to understand every single step as we progress. So we're going to do it in a way that allows us to finally make it up here. But again, if you, for whatever reason, don't develop the skills necessary to reach that next plateau, you'll know it, because you will come in here one day, we will go through the class, and you'll leave here thinking, what did I just watch? That's your first indication that you're falling into this pit. So if that happens, do come see me, do come by during the office hours, and do it very quickly, because your opportunity to get back on that podium will erode the further along you allow this to go. So at the first signs that things aren't making sense, come to my office hour, call me over during practice. Just call me over and say, Dr. Udicevich, I have no idea what's going on, and I will help you and get you back on track. All right, course procedure. I run the course, like all my courses, I run it like a research lab meeting. That means all concepts are open to ideas and discussion. Just raise your hand if you want to see something, if you want to bring up an example from the real world, feel free. I'm a firm believer that there are no bad questions or bad ideas. You probably have heard the phrase, there's no bad question except the one that is unasked. I believe that, but there are wrong ideas. And in statistics, get ready for a lot of wrong ideas, because the way that you probably think numbers work is not the way that they actually work. So get ready for maybe even as high as 95% of what you think stats is about to be completely wrong, but that is just the way that it goes. That's just how science works. So once again, you are going to be talking to a very sympathetic ear, because I do research, and 95% of the things I think is going to happen don't. And that's what you do with research, so don't be surprised if this is your experience as well. In terms of the required text or resources, I'm in my final stages of setting this up. I just wanted to overhaul it apparently a little bit more than I had planned on it, but this will be the text. It's completely online. It's done through my lab, and we will be signing everybody up into this course next class. Okay, so we're going to just kind of ease into it. I'm going to have a Canvas link, but all access will be, all resources will be accessed through this Pearson.com MyLab solution. And this is a great way to kind of interact with statistics. It's got a lot of features that will really help you be able to learn statistics a lot easier, including stuff like immediate feedback, hints to help you out, and multiple attempts. And we'll go into all those details again next class once I've finalized all the last little finishing touches. In terms of resources that we're going to need in this course beyond the text, for this course you're going to need Excel, and for this course you're going to need SPSS. You do not have to pay for any of these. All right, so I want to make that very, very clear. Excel, when you're at IUSB, so when you're here on campus, Excel is free. It's installed on all of our computers, so just use your login credentials and you'll have access to Excel. And SPSS is also free. It's installed in the computers, I believe, in the psychology lab. It should be installed in these computers here as well. So free here at IUSB. When you're at home, however, Excel, once again, free. You can install Excel, and you actually have access to a variety of programs here using the IUware program. So if you need programs for your computer at home as a student at IUSB, they have paid the licenses. You have access to those programs. So I highly recommend check out IUware for anything that you might need. So if you don't have Excel on your computer, you can get Excel on your computer. And then for SPSS, just want to be very clear on this. This is available also for free, but you cannot install this on your home computer. You have to use the IU Anywhere cloud service that we have here. So it is available in IUware for download, but once you start using it, it'll say, oh, hey, buy a subscription, right? Pay for a subscription. I just want to make sure everybody knows that's not the one. You do not have to pay for anything. You can access it for free as long as you have an internet connection, and you can get it through OneIU, through the IU Anywhere portal. And once we get to the point where we're going to use SPSS, I'll give you more information on that. All right, performance and evaluations. Pre-tests. We're going to be doing pre-tests to encourage you and help you to get ready for each class. So these are tests on concepts and on chapters before we cover them in class. So be aware of that. I use pre-tests a lot because there is a ton of psychological evidence that they work wonders in terms of learning outcomes, which is why I put them in here. If you find yourself struggling with pre-tests, also just know you can watch previous semesters of my classes on YouTube. If you're really struggling with a pre-test and you just need to see what the content is about, feel free to check out one of the lectures before you come in to class on that day. Pre-tests cannot be completed after the due dates. So this is going to be a running theme through this course. Everything in this course is set up to move you along so that you can keep pace, so you can develop the skills when you need the skills, so you can move on to the next section, so you can develop those skills when you need those skills. Because of that, pre-test, post-test assignments cannot be completed after the date. They're graded, feedback is given, it's an online solution, that is it. I'm mentioning this because I want you to be very aware of the due dates. They will be in my lab, they are in your syllabus, and it is your responsibility to make sure that you are on top of those due dates. So if you miss a pre-test for any reason other than like a medical reason or a family emergency, just know that it's already been graded. I cannot reopen it. So just remember that. It is your responsibility to make sure that you complete these. If you would like to earn those % towards your final grade, make sure that you complete them by the due date. Study plan mastery points. So there's a mastery points study plan that's been used in my lab. This will be used to supplement your pre-test scores. So I know that the pre-test can sometimes be very challenging. Studies have shown that even if you can't do the pre-test, just attempting the pre-test is going to do wonders for your learning of the material later on. Now, it's going to do wonders of your learning on the material later on, but struggling on a pre-test will not do wonders for your grade in this course. So, to help offset that, to make sure that you have the opportunity to do the pre-test, but it doesn't wipe out your score, I've implemented this study plan mastery points, where regardless of the grade you get on your pre-test, if you complete the mastery points, you will get 100% on that pre-test. So this is your backup plan for the pre-test. So just have that in awareness. I don't want you to have any anxiety or worry about, oh no, I'm not doing well on the pre-test. Just know that you can increase every single one of your pre-tests to 100% by doing the study lab, study plan mastery points. Post-test as well as pre-test work the same way. After we've learned the material, after the homework has been submitted, you'll be doing a post-test. That's kind of an inventory of where you are. And once again, just make sure that you get those in by the due date. We are going to have exams. We're going to have 4 of them. They are officially non-cumulative, but as I said before, stats, more so than any other course, builds on everything. So by its very nature, it's cumulative, but really it'll just be, you know, the skills that we've covered in each of those particular sections that is explicitly being tested on the exams. The big thing for the exams that I want you to be well aware of is that they are open book. And what I mean by open book is that they are open anything you want to use except other people. So we're going to try as much as we can to develop skills in this course that you would use in the real world. And in the real world, when I do statistics, all anybody cares about is, can I do statistics and can I do them right? And they don't care if the statistics is up here memorized in my head, or if I have to, and I've done this often, Google a tutorial on how to do that particular statistical test in SPSS. All that matters is, can you get it done? The exams are going to be the exact same way. Can you get it done? Can you do these tests by yourself? You need to do the work on your own, but it can be open book. You'll have access to your textbook. You'll have access to Canvas, so you can take a look at the lecture notes. You can make your own notes, your own little how-to guides. Whatever it is that you need to get the job done, feel free to prepare those materials. The one thing, though, that I really want you to be well aware of, now that you're aware that it's open book or open any resources that you want to use, open book is just there so you can offload your memory onto something external so you can focus on the actual task at hand. This is not a memorization course. This is a course in can you do the statistics. However, open book does not mean that you can learn the material during the exam. So if you come in here knowing the material, but just haven't memorized the formulas, just haven't memorized, the steps, but you know how to do the stats, you will do amazingly on the exam. So if you're starting a hypothesis test, and you're like, okay, I need to do this hypothesis test, what were the 5 steps? Let me just check my notes. Okay, those are the 5 steps. Let me do step 1. That's how we do step 1. If that's you during the exam, awesome. You're going to do amazing on the exam. If, on the other hand, you get to that question and you're like, all right, I got to do a hypothesis test. What is a hypothesis test? Let me open up the chapter. I guess I'll start reading here. Hypothesis tests are... You're going to run out of time and you're going to do horribly. So use the open book the way that it's intended so that you don't have to memorize things, but don't think at all that you're going to be able to learn it during that exam period. Homework assignments, most of those are going to be through my lab. A couple of those will be submitted through Canvas. And in my lab, if you do not finish this is the one exception, if you do not finish your homework, you can complete it after the due date, but on anything that was not finished, you're going to lose 20% per day, so make sure that you finish those quickly, or, just before the due date. All right, we're almost done for today, so we're going to wrap this up real quick. Just one last little thing with the syllabus in terms of grading and then in terms of how to read the schedule. So this is the grading breakdown, pretty standard. This is where your grades come from. Pretty standard, except for one part. So you can see the 8 pre-test, 8 post-test, 14 homework assignments are worth that much of your grade. But then I also have what I call my sliding scale of exams. So the way that I grade exams is that your best exam, the one that you perform the best on, your highest graded grade for your exam, that's going to be worth the most towards your final grade. The exam that you score the lowest on is going to be worth the least towards your final grade. And what this is basically built-in forgiveness. It's built-in understanding that it takes students different times to get on board with statistics. So for some of you, we're going to be in week 1. For some of you, we're going to be in the very next class where we meet. And you're going to take a look at what we're covering that day, and you're going to go, yes, it makes sense. And the rest of the stats is going to be super straightforward for you. For some of you, that might occur in week number 4, right? Week number 4 might be when you're staring at the screen and going, oh, I get it now. Oh my gosh, yes, of course, that makes sense. And the rest of the stats is going to be straightforward to you. For some of you, it might take week 8. It might take a little bit longer. So because everybody kind of learns at different speeds, I did that for, I incorporated this sliding scale of forgiveness. So the way that this works is, like, let's say that you don't get it. Exam number 1 comes by, and you're still working on developing your skills, you're still practicing, you're still following the program. But let's say that you don't do well on exam number 1. Let's say that you get 60% on exam number 1. 60% on exam number 1 means that you got 3 out of 5. So you lost 2% towards your final grade. You can still get an A+ in this course. Plus there's bonus opportunities later. So even if you tank on your first exam, don't give up. People have done really poorly on their first exam and knocked exam 2, 3, and 4 out of the park and still gotten an A+ in this course. Don't get discouraged. Remember the built-in forgiveness. It's there. Take advantage of it. And you know, just allow yourself to go through this process to develop those particular skills. Accommodation, we'll just kind of go through that. And responsibilities, that's all available in the syllabus. Any questions before we wrap up today? All right, so that is it for this first meeting. So again, I'm working on finalizing the MyLab course. Next class, I'm going to show you how to sign in and make sure that everybody's in the correct place on that online MyLab. We got nothing for you to do in the meantime, so just let it all sink in. Get ready for the journey and prepare to do the work. And I guarantee you, everybody can do this, and I can't wait to get started next class. Other than that, we are done for the day.